in spite of that actual reality, you've had lots of pundits and mainstream economists coming out to say, I just don't understand why the American people aren't in love with this economy and giving Joe Biden all the credit in the world. I don't get why they don't love Bidenomics. And we had a perfect example of this from the New York Times economist Paul Krugman going on and on about how great the economy is, literally the day before we got inflation numbers that showed it had spiked once again. Let's take a listen to what he was saying.
The striking thing, if you look at it, is not just, the economic data have been surreally good. I mean, even optimists are just stunned by how quickly and how painlessly inflation has come down. We're, no hint of a recession, at least so far. Never know, but no, so far. Inflation, not too far from the target of 2% and under 3% by most measures, and all of that just achieved painlessly. So this is great. This is a Goldilocks economy. People say it's a terrible economy. But what's really odd is that people don't behave as if it's a terrible economy. We can talk about surveys in which people seem to be relatively happy with their own financial situation, or we can just look at behavior. People are out there with a lot discretionary consumer spending, travel, hotels, restaurants, all of that is booming. So people are acting as if they're in good shape financially, and yet they say, wow, this is a disastrous economy. Somebody must be a disaster for somebody, but not for me. And, we don't really understand why this is happening. But and I can come up with multiple stories, but it is, I think, important to point out that there's a really profound and peculiar disconnect going on.
Goldilocks
Okay.
economy.
Goldilocks.
So really good.
Yeah.
This man has a Nobel Prize in economics.
Right. Yeah, I know.
And he can't figure out. Let's help explain why people are not feeling the love on Bidenomics. Well, we just got some numbers in. Let's put this up on the screen that inflation actually ticked back up again.
Yep.
And the primary reason is one that's kind of important to ordinary people: gas. Gas is the biggest factor, accounting for over half the increase. Shelter, especially rent, also a big factor.
Oh.
Now, there were a million stories, Saagar, that, listen, I am as nerdy about this stuff as anyone. I like to get it, okay, what things are going up and what's not and what's driving it, et cetera. There was a lot of spin about how, well, actually, these numbers are not that bad because it's just gas and it's just rent.
Just gas.
And
just
it's
rent.
like, what do you think that most people are spending their money on? Like, what is hitting their pocketbook the hardest? And obviously, those are two of the biggest factors in terms of people being able to make it month to month.
Krystal, the price of gas as of this morning, national average is $3.85, which is very high. In California, the average state price is $5.50. All across the West, it is well over $4 and remains $5 in some very, very populous states. Some of the cheapest gas in the country is down south in Georgia and in Texas, where it's still only $3.40 a gallon. That's very high, especially when you compare it to where things were pre-pandemic levels. There's no getting around it. There's a lot of conversation around why and what and how and energy production. Some of it usually doesn't keep in mind the Ukraine element to it, which unfortunately we don't discuss nearly enough. But
That's a
the
significant
point is that, guess what? It's not good right now. Also, his whole point about I'm doing well, but other people are, that's not even true. Put this up there. Real incomes fell last year. Everyone keeps saying, oh, real wages rose, and they're talking about a quarter. Look at the overall dip in the real income for most people from 2020 up until now. I mean, whenever you have American real income overall fell in 2022 from the previous year, and then maybe have some slight increase in 2023, you're still down by almost 2.3% for the average real income on Americans' actual salary. That's almost all entirely because of inflation. And so when you have that, you have a record amount of people who either drop out of the labor force or who are finding underemployment. So they're technically employed, but they're not employed to like the highest degree. And what? If you go to the grocery store, try walking out of there with less than $100 in a single bag, in a single trip. It's almost impossible for the vast majority of people. So it's just so obvious what's happening. But the White House won't learn. And people like Krugman and all that just keep scolding him. It's really like the Obama era. They're like, you're doing well, you're doing well, you're doing well. Yeah, but I don't have a house anymore. It's like, we're not talking about the last quarter. We're talking about I had a house and now I don't have one, and I probably never will have one. Oh, and now I'm 67, and inflation is nuking my entire salary.
There's the real disconnect is between pundits like Paul Krugman and the reality that people are actually facing. Put B7 up on the screen. This is a Jacobin article from our friend Branko Marcetic, who broke down, hey guys, here is why people are not feeling the love
C7,
when it comes to quote unquote Bidenomics. He writes, inflation is slowing down, but working class life in the US is still hard to afford. And he goes through the numbers. This is not hard to do, guys. This is not hard to do. The spike in childcare costs far outpaced the general inflation rate, forcing parents to fork over thousands of dollars a month or to drop out of the workforce to take care of their kids. And by the way, there is more funding that is drying up that was put in place during the pandemic to help make child care more affordable. So that situation is only set to get worse. Prescription drugs, which 66% of all US adults use, often as a condition of staying alive and healthy, have likewise blown past overall inflation with a whopping 31.6% year-to-year increase. And the very moderate reforms that were put into the Inflation Reduction Act, that only applies to seniors, and it only applies to like 10 drugs, and it only applies in like 3 years' time. So don't hold your breath on that really changing the dynamic with prescription drug costs. He also talks about how housing is wildly expensive. And obviously the measures that the Federal Reserve took to hike interest rates to try to get inflation under control has made housing perhaps the most expensive that it has ever been in history. And so, and he also points to insurance premiums on homes, something we talked a lot about here, cars, and healthcare. So on all of the areas that are most critical to Americans just being able to afford to live and have a basic standard of living, something approaching or approximating a middle-class lifestyle, all of those things have gone up and up and up. Really, in a lot of ways, predates even this current surge of inflation. But it's not hard to see why people would be financially strapped. And we have tracked these numbers, every week I feel like there's a new indication of how much people are struggling because of two things. Because number one, you had all of the pandemic social safety net, which genuinely helped people go away. And number two, you had inflation spike at the very time when people were losing the support that they previously had.
Yes, and unfortunately, the White House wants to keep telling us about how good things are. Their top economic advisor, Jared Bernstein, took the podium yesterday. Here's his case for why you're doing better than you actually are. Take a listen.
Turning to Bidenomics, we start from a position of strength. The U.S. economy is in solid shape, with real GDP growth supported by strong consumer spending that is itself supported by a strong labor market delivering wage gains, accounting for inflation. And I have a next figure showing that the extent to which you see inflation coming down and prices and wages actually beating prices there, both for all workers and for middle wage workers.
Oh, well, once again, we come back to that canard. As we just showed you, it's not even true. If you look on the actual time scale, they're trying to shrink it so that they're like, oh, well, only in the last quarter, everything's good. Oh, unemployment is so great. Look, vast majority of people, you can't tell them, you can't spin them away from the facts. It's obvious, it's true, and it's their own fault where they find themselves right now.
It is interesting. The one group that has actually seen their real incomes increase is Americans with no high school diploma.
Yeah.
They saw their incomes increase by 6.4% over and above inflation. And that is a testament to the one number that, they really want to point to, which is the very low unemployment rate, which is part of what has enabled, the labor actions that we've been covering and all of that going on. But there's a lot more to the economy than just what is the unemployment rate. There's also, does your job pay enough that you can live? How much are the costs of things that are critical to the thriving and basic survival of yourself and your family? And there seems to be just a total, I don't know if it's intentional blind spot or what, but complete blind spot over those pieces. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.